Hi everyone, I'm Mark Allen and I'm the Global Product Manager for Floralife. And basically what that means is I look after the development of new products. I should say now, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to leave them in the comments and we'll get to them towards the end. And today we wanted to host a webinar to explain our Floralife 2025 sustainability plan. But the thing is, with doing that, there's just a lot of words that, I'm sure you're used to hearing, like carbon footprint and water savings, recyclable, circular economy, plastic savings, and the list kind of goes on. And really it made me think, actually, it would be better to bring it back a level and really explain what sustainability is all about. Why as an industry we should be doing these changes, and what are these challenges that the planet's really facing. So the presentation for the first part will be giving context to what sustainability is all about and why companies are making changes now, why we at Floralife are making changes now. And then the second part will be about our Floralife 2025 plan. And from here, over the coming months and years, we can engage in more webinars about specific subjects such as packaging or waste savings, water reduction, and so on. So if you don't know, Floralife is a company that's been around for more than 80 years now. We actually invented the first flower food packet, along with many other products, protocols, innovations to keep cut flowers as fresh as possible as they travel throughout the supply chain and into the hands of the consumers. And recently, the topic of sustainability has, come up more and more often. And a few years ago, we found ourselves in a position where we questioned the sustainable choices we were making, and if we truly understood what it was we were trying to achieve with those choices. And this led to a rethink or refocus on sustainability, which I now lead for Floralife. And through this presentation, I'm going to try and share our experience and understanding. So over the past few years, we've carried out many projects such as, reducing our plastic, reviewing our formulas, carbon footprint assessing of our products. And the problem was we were going from project to project without really understanding the core reason for why we were doing what we were doing. For example, our sustainable film project, replacing our flower food packaging with something more sustainable. It really opened my eyes to the subject. As we progressed this project in 2018, we found ourselves with far more questions than answers. And at that point, we stopped and went back to school because we found we could go in several different directions for sustainable film. And the unanswered questions meant it felt almost irresponsible to launch something we didn't fully understand. So last year, multiple members of the Smithers Oasis company achieved a qualification in business sustainability management from the University of Cambridge. And long story short, it helped us develop the Floralife 2025 plan, which we'll discuss shortly. But first, what is sustainability? Like I mentioned before, what is driving us to make all these changes? What drives you to make your changes? And when putting together this presentation, I spent 60 seconds or so writing everything that popped into my mind when thinking about the whole subject. And I think you can see on the screen here, it really illustrates one of the issues businesses face when trying to adopt sustainable practices. There just seems to be so much wide varying stuff involved that it's almost impossible to catch up on. It's ever changing, and quite honestly, sustainability really is about almost everything. So when thinking about sustainability, it's best not to let everything overwhelm you and look at what the core of it's all about and build it up over time. So cutting through everything, the base definition for what sustainability is the following. It's the ability to sustain or improve the current standard of living without jeopardizing the standard of living for future generations. The problem is a lot of sustainability related problems, whether that be environmental or social, they're directly related to one word, and that word is consumption. What we consume, how we consume it, why are we consuming it, and ultimately, is it really necessary? And by consume, I don't mean, what we eat. I mean what we buy and use to live. Our electricity, our cars, our fuel, our furniture, our clothes, packaging, even our flowers. And the thing is, there's just so many different factors that drive this consumption, whether that be population increasing, markets developing, so there's just more money for everyone to spend, education, healthcare improvements, technology improvements, infrastructure improvements. Basically, as our race develops, our consumption of everything just exponentially increases. And you'll notice at the top right some keywords. These are for you to note down and Google after the presentation to give some additional understanding of what I'm talking about. For example, this increased rate of consumption of everything that I've been talking about is being called the Great Acceleration. And I copied some charts into the presentation to show what I mean by that. You can see from the 1950s onwards, everything is spiking, from population to rainforest loss to tourism. I mean, there's so many different charts like this, and it leads on to the question, what is all this consumption of everything doing to our planet and our people? So the term being used for this is the Anthropocene. And to keep it simple, time since the Earth was born 4.5 billion years ago is split into these things called epochs. And an epoch is basically a period of time defined by a specific characteristic. And there's lots of geology and everything else involved in this, rock formations and so on. But characteristic could be, for example, a state of the climate. You'll all have heard of something called the Ice Age. That in itself was an epoch. And when the ice melted, the climate shifted and there was a new epoch. Now these epochs typically last millions of years, and we actually transitioned into the current epoch around 12,000 years ago. So actually you could say that this current epoch we're in is relatively new. There is actually hot debate whether right now the world has already transitioned into a new epoch after this 12,000 years since starting it. And that's what's being called the Anthropocene. And the reasoning for this shift is basically because humans are causing significant measurable changes to the planet, and it's all down to our significantly increased consumption of everything. So back in 2009, some very smart scientists got together at the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden and defined these things called the planetary boundaries. These are 9 different areas we monitor to understand on the bigger picture where our planet sits environmentally. It's all based on being in a safe zone and trying to stop progressing into this yellow or red zone, which is all about increased risk. And that risk refers to the chances that a devastating, irreversible change will occur. So an example could be if global temperatures continue to rise, then the ice caps can melt, forcing irreversible changes to the balance of the planet. Ecosystems are disrupted, certain life can die off. So they've defined these 9 boundaries, and I'm going to try and explain these boundaries in the context of the floral industry. So on the next few slides, you'll see these 9 planetary boundaries. And at the top of each one, I've put the current level of global risk, safe being green, yellow being moderate, and red being high risk. You could almost think of it as yellow and red, meaning we need to figure this out fast. But that also doesn't mean we should ignore the green. It needs to stay green. And then white, if you see any white, it means that the boundary and current state has not actually been yet defined. I've also put who I believe in the industry these boundaries apply to. And spoiler alert, they all pretty much are relevant to everyone in the chain in some way or another. Okay, so first we look at climate change. And this is probably the most known of all the boundaries. What this refers to is the gradual increasing temperature of the planet. And basically what's happening here is as more greenhouse gas emissions, mainly driven by carbon dioxide, enters the atmosphere, it causes this insulating effect where the sun's energy comes in and basically struggles to get back out. And as the planet temperature changes, systems on the planet can be disrupted or modified. So when something or activity releases carbon dioxide, known as its carbon footprint, there's 2 ways to look at this carbon footprint. The first is the operating carbon footprint, meaning your energy usage, whether that be your lights, your cooler, your heaters, or your heating, gas consumption of your vehicles, and so on. Then the second is the carbon footprint of your products, because you have to think, for you to use, let's say, I don't know, a cardboard box and package your flowers, there's been a full manufacturing process to make that box, which costs energy. There's been energy spent to farm the trees that make the cardboard. There's been carbon dioxide emissions in the shipping of the flowers before it's received at your location. So almost everything we do, whether that be at the farm, the wholesale, the florist shop, consumer's home, all contribute towards the final carbon footprint of the cut flowers. Okay, next we have novel entities. It's the dumping of harmful man-made chemicals and substances into our environment. This includes things like microplastics and radioactive materials and things like that. And we really need to understand how the dumping of these things in different environments, like landfills or oceans, can cause issues with life on the planet. So from a cut flower perspective, this is all of our packaging waste, unspent chemicals and things like that. Can we adopt a reduce, reuse, or recycle model where we actively try and cut back on what we consume or waste, while also looking to repurpose something before its end of life? This is where a lot of new packaging crazes fit in, like recyclable materials or compostable materials. And we really have to understand the bigger picture when considering these different packaging materials.
It really is interesting when you start to learn about packaging, because I can guarantee everything isn't quite what it seems, and there really isn't a golden answer for sustainable packaging, at least for a lot of stuff. Okay, stratospheric ozone depletion is all to do with something called our ozone layer. What our ozone layer does is significantly reduce the amount of sun's UV radiation or ultraviolet radiation entering the planet. The increased use or mismanagement of ozone depleting chemicals such as CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons are called, reduces that protective layer and can cause significant harm to life on the planet. And actually, if we look back to the 1980s, we were actually significantly worse on this, but thanks to something called the Montreal Protocol, an international treaty put in place to phase out these harmful chemicals, we're actually on track to stopping the destruction of the ozone layer. For the flower industry, all of our coolers and air conditioning units wouldn't operate without something called a refrigerant. Now, I will say, if there's one thing our industry is great at besides flowers, it's cooling technology, for all of our cold chain that we maintain. So in the past, this may have been an issue, but with regulation improvements and technological improvements, our industry really is pioneering cooling technology that steps beyond old Freon refrigerants. What I would say is, if you have an old cooling unit, whether that be in your store or your warehouse or truck, make sure it's regularly maintained and up to code. So next is atmospheric aerosol loading, and this is all to do with the emissions of microparticles. Funnily enough, typically things found in aerosols, but it can also be things like dust or smoke. And the issue with these microparticle pollution is it can get in the way of key planetary processes like cloud formation. It can affect monsoon systems and things like that. Actually, in South Asia, monsoon systems have actually been completely altered by impact on this boundary. I mean, I would say this is probably the least relevant planetary boundary for our industry, but still important to make sure we play our part correctly. Okay, next is ocean acidification. Something like a quarter of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is eventually absorbed by the oceans. And this actually reduces the surface pH of water. So this move towards an acidic environment actually dissolves key minerals needed by things like corals and shellfish in order to survive. And you have to remember that these shellfish are part of other ecosystems that rely on them existing. So when they go, what happens to the other life that relied on them being there? So I've put on here the same as climate change. And the reason that is all directly related to the quantities of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And again, everything we do drives a carbon footprint, from our packaging to our lighting, our coolers, fuel used to deliver flowers, and so on. So we have to consciously make an effort to reduce our impact. Next is biogeochemical flows. It sounds very fancy, but it's all to do with the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus we put out into the environment. It's primarily driven by agriculture. Not only do these contribute to climate change, but they also contribute to biodiversity loss in the seas and in the oceans, as chemicals make their way into the rivers and then disrupt those ecosystems. So as a planet, we roughly consume double the target amount of nitrogen and phosphorus than we should to stay inside that green safe zone. So for the cut flower industry, this is mainly to do at the grower level or the farms. How much fertilizers are we using on our crops, and how are we managing the waste runoffs? I hear there's some great things growers are doing, such as composting their own waste with the use of worms and other great things to actually reduce their nitrogen use. So there is some really good stuff going on in this area. And I know on here I put farm, but actually indirectly everyone in the chain, if they have waste, is encouraging the farm to use more of these fertilizers and stuff to actually produce the shrink that happens in the chain. So everyone really has an impact here. Okay, next is freshwater usage. So the Earth is really thought of as this water planet. I mean, we have water everywhere. The issue is only 3% of that water is freshwater, and the majority of it is locked, or the majority of that 3% is locked in the ice caps. So fresh water is required for a lot of processes, but most importantly, it's required for life to thrive. Some areas of the world have far less access to water than others, and we need to make sure from a social perspective, all have access to this basic need. We really can't waste it. Water is a requirement at almost every stage of the cut flower chain. We hydrate our crops, we hydrate after harvest, we hydrate after shipping, we hydrate in store, consumers hydrate again. I mean, there's lots of great things going on at farms to cycle the water to be reused. And, we need to make sure these reusing systems are found throughout the full cut flower supply chain. And actually, shameless plug here, Floralife hydration and storage product is great at reducing water consumption because it keeps the water clearer for longer and allows multiple use of the same solution. But I'll stop selling Floralife. We'll get back to the presentation. Okay, so next we have land system change. This is all about the conversion of forests and wetlands into agricultural land. And when we do this, we disrupt the cycling of carbon dioxide. Less trees means more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Additionally, there's strong links to life loss because, those forests that we remove, they were actually creatures' habitats. The big question here is for the co-flower industry, the big question for the co-flower industry here is, are we getting the best out of our land? Can we improve our yield per acre? But also a lot of our packaging is plant-based, which is encouraging deforestation. You'll also see here, I've put us, all of us as an impact. And at first you might think this is a farm problem, but as our consumptions of stems increase, as we shrink and throw away dying stems in the chain, we actually encourage an overproduction of stems, and it actually forces agriculture expansion. And finally, we have biosphere integrity, or you can call this biodiversity. And biodiversity is just a fancy way of saying how diverse is life on this planet. It's all to do with the killing off of living species, the extinction of certain plants and animals. At this moment, of all the species we know about, we've actually lost more than 10% of them due to our footprint on this planet. And what you can see here is this boundary is directly related to the performance of the previous 8 boundaries that we talked about. For example, as our carbon emissions rise, climate change increases, the warming of the planet causes the ice caps to melt, which means species such as polar bears are being stressed. While all that's going on, the carbon dioxide is being absorbed by the oceans, causing shellfish to struggle. Other ecosystems are impacted by shellfish and corals being missing. You have issues with freshwater shortages causing issues with other ecosystems. You can come up with many different things that are going on directly related to our consumption of everything, our footprint on this planet. So to control our impact on all species, on all life on this planet, we need to change. It really is time for change. Okay, so we've discussed all the planetary boundaries and the issues that the planet and our industry faces from an environmental perspective. But how do we maintain those boundaries and stay inside the safe zone? And additionally, how do we balance the achieving of those boundaries with societal improvements, better healthcare, education for all, freedom of speech, gender equality, and so on. So this is where the MDGs, or the Millennium Development Goals, and the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, come in. Back in the early 2000s, the 8 Millennium Development Goals were launched. These goals were there to try and measure, track, and achieve improvements that keep everything balanced. And as things progressed, focus on sustainability really did intensify. And it was obvious we actually needed a new approach. And in 2012, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were formed. These are 17 goals, or I guess you could say 17 focus areas, that when launched had 169 different specific targets to achieve to allow us to move the planet in a sustainable direction, both environmentally and socially. And these goals are across all industries, it's not just the floral industry. So you can see here we have goals related to our consumption of things. We've got health and well-being in the middle, education, climate action, hunger, and so on. And I'm not going to go through each of these goals, but I really do recommend you Googling them and digesting what they're all about, because they really can play a big part in adopting a sustainable business approach. Okay, sorry, take a drink. Okay, now when approaching sustainability, it's important to know it's more than just the environment, or impact on the environment, I should say. It's also about society, the equality, freedom of speech, access to water, education, and things like that. If we go back to that definition of what sustainability is, then the part about sustaining or improving current standard of living is all about making sure everyone on this planet has access to that same standard of living. We're all equals, and with that, we are all entitled to the same quality of life. So the 3-pillar model you see on the screen illustrates how to approach sustainability very well. Basically, for something to be sustainable, it needs to be able to check the 3 boxes. First being environmental, second being social, and then finally the third being economical. And this model is also referred to as people, planet, and prosperity. You can't truly say that you're making a sustainable change unless you've thoroughly understood or understand the impacts across these 3 sections. And the interesting part about this is actually the economical side. You know, at the end of the day, for a business to make a sustainable change, it needs to be financially sustainable, meaning in order to keep doing it, investing in it, it needs to also make business sense. You know, what is the point in doing something that is perceived as environmentally sustainable, but increases costs so much that no one purchases the product? You spend a lot of time and effort on something that seems sustainable, and you can make a lot of nice stories about it, but in reality drives no change for the planet. It turns into really just a big waste of time. So you have to be very realistic with the projects you take on and realize it's about many small steps in the right direction, and we can't change the planet overnight. So you can really take this on in your own business and just start to do some small changes that help. Okay. So originally I was going to use this slide to talk about a lot of different sustainability challenges of our industry. And the issue I found when making the presentation is everything we talked about in the planetary boundaries and the development goals are somewhat relevant at some point in our industry. So you've got things like fertilizer use, land taking up for farming, water consumption, carbon footprint of flowers, packaging, ecosystem disruption, equality of labor, health and safety, social investments like education, childcare, and so on. And it all depends on where you are on the chain. So for instance, the sustainable challenges witnessed at the farm end could be very different to the sustainable challenges faced at a North American supermarket. So this is the part where I put it back on you to think about your footprint. Where are you based? What impact do you have on all of these different things? And start to digest overall, what that means for you. And I should say at this moment, there are a lot of great things going on already in the global floral industry for sustainability. You have a lot of programs for water conservation, employment schemes to encourage health and well-being. There's collaborative groups like the FSI, which is the Floriculture Sustainability Initiative. There's the Rainforest Alliance, the adoption of the Global GAP program or the GAP program. Fungicides moving from a schedule to when's needed approach. There's certainly a lot of great things going on already, far too much to be able to list. But one thing I did want to bring some attention to is waste. One challenge of our industry is by how it's set up, we can be fairly segmented. So for example, we look at improvements at the farm, we look at improvements at the importing level or the wholesale level or the retail level, but we rarely see the full picture and look at it as a full picture. And at the end of the day, our industry is here to allow the user or the receiver of flowers to get that great benefits or that beautiful experience. But to do that, we inevitably generate a lot of waste in all parts of the flower chain. Especially when you consider cut flowers are perishable. They don't last forever, and we really need to get the best out of them. So if you think about every single stem that is grown, first it takes up land space. It has fertilizers used, water and other products are used to allow it to grow healthily. It'll then be harvested, hydrated, packaged, shipped, rehydrated, repackaged, cold storage, shipped, rehydrated, cold storage. Maybe it'll be repackaged again, and then finally it might end up in the consumer's home. And that's a lot of investment in energy, water, packaging, and everything else, for every single stem. So imagine the waste of everything if that single stem makes it to the store, but then dies before it gets in the hands of the consumer. What this waste or shrink throughout the chain does is it drives an overconsumption of stems. And if as a team we can work together to solve that, then we're certainly moving in the right direction. So that leads me on to the Floralife 2025 plan. And as I mentioned at the start, we used to approach sustainability as individual projects, but we had no real understanding of the impact of those projects or the impact that those projects were having. We went back to school, we figured all this out and developed the sustainability plan, or our sustainability plan. It's our 5-year journey with 5 core focus areas: climate change, water stewardship, product portfolio, sustainable packaging, and then finally stakeholder awareness. Each focus area or commitment has or will have clearly defined targets that we want to achieve. And the plan is a collection of projects that all filter into the achieving of these targets that are set. So these goals are not just about Floralife internally achieving some targets, but also working with our customers, key partners, to help them achieve their goals also. Together we can significantly reduce industry waste and effectively control water consumption. So I ask you all to challenge us as we embark on our journey, but of course get involved, share your thoughts, and see how we can partner together to really solve some fairly large issues. Okay. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to explain a handful of our active projects that all filter into the Floralife 2025 plan and the target set. So for climate change, like we discussed earlier, all to do with the carbon footprint of our products or operations, we're actually working with Carbon Footprint Limited, who develops quality assurance standards for carbon footprint assessing. And we've assessed our Express 200 range in both the Americas and Europe. Like I mentioned in the presentation, there's a carbon footprint for everything, including the products themselves. So we figured out our Express 200 range carbon footprint, and working with Carbon Footprint Limited, we're setting targets to improve over time and reduce the carbon footprint of that range. The learnings from this, will help us move onto other product ranges, like our Express 100 or our packets that go to the consumer's homes, so that we can really get a full picture of what our products are doing from a carbon footprint perspective. Okay, so water stewardship. This commitment is all about reducing our use of fresh water. So the daily use of water in our buildings. Can we be smarter with our bathrooms and our kitchens, reducing the amount of water coming out of all the faucets? But next is, you may all know, half of our product range is liquid formulations. Now inside a liquid formulation, there is a certain level of water, and each product is different. But when trying to conserve water, it brings up the question, can we remove water from our formulations and make a more concentrated product? If you're in the supermarket, you'll see this all the time. Dish soap bottles are getting smaller and smaller, and that's because less product goes further due to its concentration. So in the US, over the past year, we have been actively transitioning customers from our Express 200 formula to our Express Ultra 200 formulation. This significantly reduces water use inside the formulation while still delivering the same quality of product and benefits, because that use solution is exactly the same. We've also done a similar thing for our bulk crystal clear and our Express 300 liquids, launching an ultra version. You can see here on the screen. So concentrating formulas like this also brings benefits beyond water conservation, such as halving packaging required, halving freight for each product because less water is being shipped. And with our carbon footprint assessing, we've also proved that concentrating products like this reduces the carbon footprint, and we do have figures for that. And finally, and probably most importantly, we're actively working with our customers to save on their water usage. Floralife products at all stages of the supply chain are great for keeping water clearer for longer, allowing reuse of the same solution multiple times. So instead of replenishing your bucket solution every day, this could drop to as low as every third or fourth day. So there's some great savings that we can achieve together. Okay. All right. So product portfolio is our commitment to always moving our product range in a sustainable direction. You'll see synergies between a lot of our commitments, for example, developing optimally concentrated products like our ultra ranges, which goes on to achieve targets in water stewardship. But what we are doing here is bringing sustainability understanding to the earliest stages of product development. Many of the issues seen in the market these days are because companies launch a product and then figure out how to change it to make it more sustainable, when really it's far more efficient and effective to develop a product with sustainability in mind from the offset. So the learnings we've gained and the continued learning our team receives will make sure the right choices are being made from the beginning. Another thing we recently received is our Fair Trade certification, which allowed us to launch our Express Clear Ultra 200 and consumer packets in Fair Trade certified version. So to keep flowers fed as they travel through the chain, they require sugar, nutrients to help fuel their cell activities. And many of our products contain varying levels of sugar to provide that nutrition to cut flowers. So what the Fair Trade certification does is guarantee the farmers of those sugars receive a fair wage, healthcare, and other employment benefits that many of us may take for granted. We also recently sent our formulas off for biodegradability testing. There's a lot of focus on packaging these days, but what about the product inside? We're committed to seeing the full picture and receive confirmation that our Crystal Clear and Express Universal 300 formulas meet the ASTM D5511 biodegradability standard. So basically, if our formulas end up in an active landfill environment, then we know they will biodegrade. And then finally, and why I bolded this, in my opinion, most importantly, we have our product's ability to help customers achieve their waste saving goals. As I mentioned earlier, saving on shrink can significantly improve our industry's footprint on this planet. In the US alone, multiple billions of stems enter the market every year. Let's estimate around 5 billion stems. And if we assume 2% shrink at the farm to export level, maybe 3% at the import or distribution level, and then let's be conservative and say around 6% at the retail level, overall, that actually adds up to 500 million stems in shrink. That's 500 million stems grown, hydrated, treated, harvested, hydrated again, shipped, packaged, cooled, I mean, so on, right? And that adds no value to the industry. And not only did it impose a large footprint on the planet in all kinds of ways, but also imposed an impact to your cost figures. So our mission for the last 80 years has been to develop products that help reduce this shrink in all different ways. And we look for new opportunities to help you improving in this way. Okay, so the next one is sustainable packaging. And I need to be really careful here as I do have a tendency to go off in many different directions. I mean, I really can't talk for hours on this, on packaging trends and the limitations, new technologies and things. But this is what started our journey a couple of years ago. And through that journey, we decided to launch our recyclable paper packet. This packet uses paper material certified to EN 13430, which is packaging recoverable by material recycling. And using that 3-pillar model we discussed earlier, we actually determined this was our best first step, but certainly not our last step. One issue with sustainable packaging is what it can do to the cost of a product. All of these new niche technologies aren't produced in a scale that compete with plastics. So the benefit of the paper packets is it's a first step whilst also being affordable. And the interest for this across our customers has grown significantly over the past year. We're also reviewing all of our components used in our products and assessing whether or not they're acceptable. Our lids and caps, the same plastics or the same polymer is the container that they go on, so that can be recycled together. You've probably seen, you might get some packaging where it tells you to separate them and sort them in a different way. So can we make them all the same so that they can be sorted together? Our pails used for the powder products over-engineered with too much plastic. Our labels made with the best material. So, I mean, there's so many questions that are being asked, and we need to set targets to achieve. And with this, we've onboarded all of our key suppliers, so they not only are aware of our plans, but actively partner with us in improving our packaging. Okay, and finally, we have stakeholder awareness. So when we say stakeholder, we mean anyone with an interest in Floralife, whether that be our staff, our customers, our suppliers, or other key partners. And what we want to achieve with this commitment is, I guess, twofold. The first is encouraging an internal understanding and passion towards sustainability. We're really trying to shift our culture. You hear me being passionate about sustainability, but that's not enough. Our sales team, our management team, our operators, they also need to be just as focused and passionate. But we also want to share that understanding and that passion externally too. So over the past year, we've worked with customers on sustainability-related challenges, and together, achieved and learned far more than we could have apart. We recently spoke on sustainability at the IFE convention, and have targets to continue to speak on the subject. Once we're all on the same page with this, I don't think there can be anything that can stop us. I think we can really achieve some great things. We also recently joined FSI 2020, which stands for the Floriculture Sustainability Initiative. This is a collaborative group of many leaders of the floral industry who collaborate together to address sustainability-related issues. And we, Floralife, look forward to engaging in those projects with them over the coming years. So I recommend you go over to fsi2020.com if you haven't heard of them. So thank you very much for all of your time. I hope the presentation has helped in some way, and I encourage you all to reach out to your Floralife representative and ask them about Floralife 2025 and how we can help you achieve some of your sustainability related challenges. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. That was very interesting. Sustainability is a hot topic, and it's a very elaborate topic as well. Thank you for making it a little bit more understandable. I think our audience has a few questions. I'd say go through those for a minute. If anyone else has questions, it's time to post them now in the chat. Mark is ready to answer your questions. In the meantime, I'm going to launch a quick poll to see what line of business everyone is in, just to get a feeling of the crowd. Feel free to indicate which answer suits your line of business best. I can see a few people filling out. Oh, that's going quickly. Wow.
Okay, shall I start looking on some?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the first questions I see here is biodegradable versus compostable. Compostable is more important and meaningful. What's my opinion? This topic could have a whole presentation done on it, maybe even 3 presentations. And biodegradable means that something breaks down into its natural components. And actually, fun fact, even oil plastic-based products can be classified as biodegradable, as long as they are broken down into those, raw carbon particles. But anyway, so actually you could consider compostable being actually biodegradable. They're kind of interchangeable in some way. But compostable is a very tricky subject. You see a lot of these, coffee cups and other things like that on the market that they say they're compostable, and that's very true, they are. But the vast majority of products that are compostable are certified to a standard that is EN 13432, or in the US, there's an ASTM standard, which is D6400. And if you look into them more closely, it means that they're certified to industrial composting conditions. And when you actually look at the access in the US to industrial compostable, very limited amount of the continent has access to an industrial composting facility. So, if you think that putting a compostable product in general waste or landfill will biodegrade, that's not necessarily true. It won't necessarily compost. It hasn't been proven to. It's been proven to compost in very specific conditions that it's probably never going to be exposed to. The best way to compost something is actually home composting. And the problem is, in fact, the STM system doesn't even have a standard to test for home compostability. There is a home composting test in Europe, but anyway, the vast majority of products on the market are never really certified to this. And it's because the test takes longer. And, having longer tests to prove something is, quite negative in this industry because, or the way that packaging is going, because changes happen so fast that by the time they're certified, there's probably something already better out there. So everyone does the quicker test, which is the EN 13432. So composting is very difficult. I absolutely agree, making product from renewable resources is great. The big question is, does the market it's being sold in have the correct infrastructure to deal with this? We actually were faced with this exact question when we launched our recyclable paper packet. We had a lot of different options when it came to compostable products, but all of them came down to this EN 13432, this industrial composting standard. And in reality, it just was never accessible by the markets these packets were being sold into, which was exactly why we decided to go down the recyclable paper route, because 1, it wasn't as expensive, which means it's more affordable for our customers. But 2, paper is by far the most widely recycled material on the planet. I think it's estimated somewhere around 60 to 70% of paper gets recycled. Now, if you go and look at how much of those compostable products get actually composted, I think you'd be very surprised by the figure. I mean, it'll be extremely low. And the problem is, even if a compostable material makes its way to somewhere that can compost it, the chances are they might sort it out and send it to landfill anyway, because they've got far more other more nutrient-rich material that they're going to compost. And then they don't want to have to deal with sorting and cleaning all of the waste of consumer-grade waste. So it's a very difficult topic. It's definitely not one that I can fully address in the Q&A section, but I think we can definitely talk about this more in the future. And I mean, Georgina can share my contact details and we can have some more conversations about this. Okay. Okay, next question. Why haven't we already decided to only produce and sell ultra-liquid storage solutions and discontinue the clear liquid solutions? Packaging saving will be significant and even make it easier for our customers. I completely agree. I think it's about phasing it and introducing it to our customers. One problem that some customers might face with switching to ultra is by increasing the concentrate and using the same container sizes, you're effectively doubling that shelf price. So to straight away buy up double the price product can sometimes be a problem. So it's about explaining all the benefits and moving the market in the right direction and slowly transitioning over time. I think it'll be a very great goal for us to move in that direction and hopefully discontinue the 1% range, absolutely. Okay. How can Floralife help influence the foam making arm of Oasis? Major single-use plastic water content. Okay, so this is a tricky subject. Obviously, Floralife is part of the Smithers Oasis group, but right now I can only really pass comment on Floralife product and Floralife sustainability plan. What I would say though is across the whole group, we have a huge commitment to sustainability. I'm very proud to work for the company, and you can see a lot of similar activities, similar conversations happening across all of the different regions, all of the different players, all of the different brands of Smithers Oasis. So there's a lot of innovation going on, and there's a lot of hard work going on in the subject. Yeah. Georgina, is there any other questions?
No, that was it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I hope it was helpful. There'll be a lot more coming in the future. And Georgina, I'll let you you sign it off.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Mark, for the great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending. As Mark said, we will be doing future webinars, and sustainability is definitely a topic that we are continuously working on and improving on, and so we'll be bringing you more information on that. Meantime, keep our social media, keep an eye on that, and see when we'll be scheduling anything else new. Have a great day, and see you at the next webinar.